Your borderline girlfriend infects you with her mental illness, and over time, she actually turns you into what's called a situational narcissist. Yeah, I'm a bad boy. Right, mommy? I'm a regressed situational narcissist, so my new mommy will love me again. Hi, this is Mike, and this is the One Thing That Heals BPD and NPD Abuse channel. And on this channel, we talk about how non-disordered people who get into romantic relationships can heal from, this video is extremely on point because the damage, the trauma that comes from being with these kinds of narcissistic abusers, these mentally ill people who are just seeking to find love, but because they have been so traumatized, they infect you with their trauma. They have to in order to make the relationship work. When that happens, the pain does not go away. It gets worse even when the relationship is over. You end up in what I call a trauma pause. You're in between the intermittent reinforcement cycle and you get paused there, waiting for mommy to come back and hoover you. And you can stay there for decades. I talk about how I cured myself, completely cured myself of this situational narcissism, this incredible pain in my book, How I Survived My Borderline Girlfriend. You can get it on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. And you can go to audiobooks.thunderwizard.com to see all my books there. All right, so this poor guy, he walked into the relationship and he was a strong, mentally healthy adult who was full of self-love and he loved others. He had great relationships. He was successful in life. He met a borderline who turned him into this regressed, angry, situational narcissist. She, in effect, turned him into somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder. Now, here's what's important to know. You actually don't have an actual personality disorder. You do not suffer from a permanent brain type of psychosis. You have extreme neurosis that has actually latched into a pattern that will not let go. For all intents and purposes, you basically are a mentally disordered person, even though you don't actually have a mental disorder. Your situational narcissism can be reversed if you do the one thing. I talk about it in my book. But we need to now go into even more depth about the difference between a narcissist and a borderline. So bear in mind that the grandiose narcissist and the borderline are the perfect couple. It doesn't work. They destroy each other. Actually, what really happens is the borderline feasts on the narcissist. The borderline breaks down the narcissist's defense wall and then feasts on him and tosses him aside. So what she's going to do with you, if you're not a narcissist, is she's going to turn you into one, and she's going to feast on you and then toss you aside. She can't help it. If you don't understand this, I'm sorry. You're angry. You still think that your borderline chose to do it and had control. It means you're still in love with her. It means you are completely attached and you are addicted and you can't rationally think things through. So this will explain why, because you've been turned into a situational narcissist. So there's narcissistic personality disorder, and then this is an actual thing in psychology. There's a couple of phrases for it. One is late onset narcissism. I like this phrase better. Acquired situational narcissism. That's perfect because it means you acquire this pseudo-narcissistic personality disorder that can be reversed if you take the right actions. All right, so the difference between narcissists and borderlines, you've heard me give the overall, which is the narcissist creates an internal fantasy. In that internal fantasy, he is God. By the way, I call narcissists by the male. I call females, I call borderlines by the feminine, because that is the strategy. There are just as many male borderlines, even though male BPD has its own really weird sort of narcissistic comorbid thing that's kind of unique to men. But they really are, if you really want to see a narcissist comorbid NPD, look at male borderlines. So you have just as many males as borderlines, and the same with women. You have just as many female narcissists. But the strategy is the archetypal masculine versus feminine. So I use those words to describe it. So I will call the borderline a she and the narcissist a he. So the male, the masculine strategy is to take their need to be loved and turn it into a need to be worshipped, where they have all power, they are all perfect, they're just like Jehovah, exactly like the biblical God Jehovah. Zero problems, they are perfect, but they cannot tolerate your imperfections. If you don't worship them perfectly, he becomes enraged and he tortures you, puts you in hell and tortures you forever. That's exactly what the narcissist does. Makes you want to think about your religion a little more deeply. And so the narcissist, in order to survive, what's actually going on is that they have no identity. They feel completely worthless. They hate themselves beyond their ability to tolerate. So they create a false self, a fantasy godlike self. And then they create this Garden of Eden fantasy. Again, Garden of Eden, that's total narcissism. This perfect little Eden. And you screw up, you're out of it. I kick you out of my fantasy, and I torture you forever, and I curse you for generations. So the narcissist creates this perfect fantasy where they are God. They take external objects. That's just a fancy way of saying real people who live in three-dimensional reality. They take them hostage into their fantasy, and then they tell you how to live out their perfect fantasy. You wear these clothes, you say these lines, you do this, you feel this way, and you make me feel how I want to feel, and then I, as the beneficent God, will love you and take care of you. Borderline has the mirror image of that. The borderline, same thing, has an internal lack of identity, extreme self-hatred, extreme insecurity, cannot regulate their incredibly dysregulated emotions. And so they create a fantasy to protect themselves, but instead of it being an internal fantasy that's separate from objective reality, it's the opposite. Objective reality becomes their canvas, and they seek to paint this beautiful Garden of Eden, and then they are going to relax into this beautiful piece of art that they've created and will be regulated by it. You will regulate them. You become the perfect, all-loving, all-forgiving, all-powerful, all-regulating God. When you don't do that, then she becomes furious, and then the inner psychopath comes out and she punishes you. She tries to destroy you. So that's the basics of it. Let's get a little bit deeper. So what the borderline lacks is an internal, stable understanding of you. So what the borderline is seeking to be regulated. The borderline wants somebody to come in and magically pour fairy dust on them and make them feel better, regulate all of their feelings. They want you to be God. So their fantasy, the shared fantasy they try to seduce you with, is that I am the perfect partner, which you interpret as, oh, I'm going to be the perfect girlfriend or wife or whatever it is. But what they're really saying is, I'm the perfect worshiper. Now, in order for me to worship you, you have to be God. So stop being this human being and become this almighty God who has no needs, who has no desires, who has no vulnerabilities, who cannot be hurt. You must be like the God in the Bible who is totally impervious to anything. is beyond all negativity, all harm, because I'm going to flip out on you, and your job is to regulate me and make it okay. Love me, accept me, forgive me. Basically, she wants to turn you into Jesus. Not Jehovah, really. She wants to turn you into Jesus, and then Jesus is just going to continuously love you and forgive you, and it'll all be okay. And as long as you do that, she's going to say, I am the perfect worshiper. I will make you feel like God. I will worship you. I will build up your ego. You will fall so in love with me as the perfect worshiper, as the perfect follower, the perfect wife, the perfect girlfriend, the perfect partner. When you see how perfect I am, you will never let go of me. And you will take the responsibility of regulating me, and I will worship you and build up your ego. Again, it's a distortion of what the archetype of the feminine is. The healthy archetype of the feminine in a relationship, again, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, don't get your panties in a bind. The healthy archetype of the feminine is, I see in you your greatness. Even if you don't see it, I see it. Not I'm making it up and pushing it on you. No, I actually have the ability to see you and see your greatness. And I support you and see you perfectly as you are. And that gives you the freedom to overcome your internal negativity about yourself. And you finally have permission to be your best. And I am happy when you are actually happy with yourself. That is the healthy archetype of the feminine. This is what the deities, the feminine deities are about. Shakti, if you want to use the word Shakti, that is what Shakti is. The Greek muse. That's exactly what a muse is. A muse comes to the writer and says, I see this beauty in you and I see this brilliance. And the writer goes, yeah. And because of that, they're able to write these great things. And then they, So this is Shakti, and this is supposed to be an internalized thing. The mother internalizes this into everybody, and everybody has this Shakti, this introject of the perfect mother, the perfect supporter that says, you can do anything, and you go, I can, and you empower yourself. The borderline has a distorted version of that. And that is, she's your muse, but what she's going to make you feel like you can do is be her God. Your worth is not in who you are. Your worth is what you do for her, and your worth is to empower her, is to regulate her, is to make her okay. And in exchange, she promises, I will worship you and keep your ego nice and huge. The opposite, of course, happens. The narcissist has the opposite scenario going on. So let me back up to the borderline. What the borderline lacks is the inability to hold the image of your true perfection within herself, or even the false God that she created. She wants you to be so unbelievable that she can't help but have this internal regulator. She's missing that. She doesn't have the ability to regulate herself. She needs you to do it for her. But first, she's going to find you. She's going to tell you how to do it, or she's going to project onto you that you're already doing it. And then she's going to try and take that and put that image in her mind. We all do this. It's called an introject. She's going to try to take this introjected part of you, which then she will carry around with her, which is what we do in relationships. When we get into a relationship, that person actually merges into our unconscious. And, if we've got a loving partner, we feel this love. It's like, yeah, I can do it because I have this great relationship. I always know my wife has my back. I always know my husband has my back. I haven't talked to him all day today, but you know what? I can feel his love. That means that you have a solid introject, an internal fantasy that actually corresponds with objective reality. So it's not psychosis, but it's still an internal fantasy of the other person. This is why when people break up, they go, you're not the person I thought you were. In other words, you're not matching up with my internal fantasy of you. So the borderline can't maintain this internal fantasy. So what she wants is to meet you, have you overwhelm her with your godlike powers of regulation, and then she hopes that that will then create this introject, and then she can go about her life and she'll be able to think about you, feel regulated, and you'll stay within her. But you don't. You don't. She's not able to create the introject. She's not capable of doing it. So what ends up happening is that she gets more and more needy. So this is when she becomes needy. This is when she's always with you. This is when you start to feel, by the way, she's treating you supposedly really well, but you start to feel really drained. You remember that part of the relationship? You got love bombed, and you're like, wow. And then it was like the love bombing seemed to be going on, but it was like cotton candy. It's like it's sweet, but it instantly melts in your mouth and it rots your teeth away. It's not real. You knew, and you felt yourself losing your energy, but you were becoming a narcissist. You were trying to create within yourself, because you have the ability to do what she can't. You can create an internal fantasy, an introject of your partner. So you did that. When she love bombed you in the beginning and made you feel like you were the ultimate, you took that as any person would, and you created an internal fantasy that continued to talk to you about how wonderful and beautiful you are. That's what you fell in love with. She stopped doing that. In external reality, she shifted. She became unpredictable. She split on you. She became needy, crazy, abusive. Whatever she did, and your external reality of her didn't line up with the perfect internal reality that you had created, your introject. The real person in objective reality completely, totally betrayed what she had put into you. And so you have a choice at that point. And this is where you decide to become a situational narcissist. A healthy person goes, wow, this chick is not at all what I thought she was. She is playing me. I am out of here. You can either do that, but if you do that, it means you have to give up on the internal perfect fantasy of her. Now, healthy people can do that. People who have a strong sense of self can do that. They can be disappointed and still love themselves. But if you even have a little bit of codependence in you, if you didn't get quite enough love or attention as a kid, then you're missing that, which is why you attached so strongly to her when she love bombed you and presented to you the false muse. I'm going to try and remember that. A borderline is a false muse, a false Shakti. She presented to you the Shakti that you've been needing. You needed it since you were a little kid. You're wanting to heal the things that your mother wasn't capable of doing. Maybe she wasn't a borderline. Maybe she wasn't a narcissist. Maybe she had some codependent issues. She didn't quite meet up. There was some trauma there. The borderline manipulated that trauma and said, I'm going to fix that. I remember my borderline telling me that. My borderline, had found out, how my mother had treated me, how, my fiance my spiritual wife had died on me, had, my ex-wife had done this. And she even said, we're going to fix all of these problems that your mom did to you and that your wife did to you and your wife. I am going to be that for you. She verbally said that. What she was saying is she was creating an introject within me and saying, you're going to be safe because I'm going to create that love within you that you didn't get. So she does that for you and you latch on super strong. She flips out for the first time. She does something unpredictable that betrays what she led you to believe she was going to be. And then you have a choice. You either have the choice to say, you know what, I know who I am, I love myself, I'm not doing this. Or you have the choice to go, all right, I can't leave because I am so now addicted to the idea of this perfect person that she's created within me. I'm going to hold on to the hope that she can be that. Now you are in a state of neurosis. So what's the difference between neurosis and psychosis? Psychosis is you prefer your internal unreal fantasy to objective reality. Your internal fantasy becomes more real to you than objective reality, and you can't tell the difference. You will impose your false reality onto reality, and that's why people go, that person's nuts. Because they're not sharing the same reality with the rest of us. And in order to interact with them, you have to be part of their false reality. So now you've become almost psychotic, because you're not completely psychotic. Remember, the psychosis is, I create a new reality. I don't like objective reality, so I create a new one, and that's now my new reality, and I've chosen to decide what reality is. And neurosis is, no, I know what objective reality is, but I really, really don't like it. And I'm in denial. I want to become psychotic. I want to believe the fantasy. So you want to believe the fantasy the borderline gives you, but you can't quite get there. So you become a situational narcissist because you realize something is severely wrong with her. And you realize that she is abusive to you, and you feel extremely drained and abused and confused, but you hold on to the fantasy, the introject. You hold on to the perfect fantasy because if you let go of it, you feel you will die. Remember, let's go back to, everything goes back to survival. And the most basic survival instinct is the need to be loved. It goes all the way back to infancy. An infant will die of lack of love long before they die of any physical, lack of food, shelter. They will die of lack of love much more quickly. Love is what drives everybody to everything that they do, no matter who they are. They want love. And so the idea, your nervous system, when you got love bombed, because you had that little bit, maybe a lot, you might have been severely codependent, or you might have just had a little bit in there. But whatever that tiny wound was that says, I didn't quite get enough love from my mom, or I feel like I didn't, that then stimulates your nervous system. It regresses you back to an infant. And, your primitive reptilian brain becomes completely focused on the nervous system seeking to survive a tragedy. And the tragedy now is intermittent reinforcement has come in. She gave you the love, then she took it away. Your nervous system flips out and says, I need that again or I'm going to die. You go, I have a choice here. I either walk away from this and I go through the pain of feeling like I'm going to die, or I hold on to the hope that she's going to turn into what she promised she was going to be. But she never, ever goes back to that. The initial idealization never comes back. Maybe she might do it a little bit. And at this point in the beginning, when she idealized you, she meant it. This is what makes her different from the grandiose narcissist who knows he's lying to you and manipulating you to get you to be part of his fantasy. He's trying to take away your identity so that you will just have none, and then he can use you like an action figure. The borderline, on the other hand, completely, totally believes that she's in love with you and that you're the perfect person for her and she's going to be the perfect person for you. She says to herself, finally, what I want is I really want to love somebody. I really want to love somebody. Like an infant really wants to love their parents. This is an infant that wasn't allowed to love her parents, wasn't allowed to love her mother. She says, I have this need to love somebody. And she says, you're going to be that one. You're finally going to regulate me. We'll fix each other and I can finally love somebody. She meant it. But then, of course, she was incapable of holding on to the perfection because you probably responded very lovingly to her. You probably gave her everything she needed. Mine used to say to me, because I would just pour love onto her. I am that kind of person in a relationship. I really do just totally. When I find somebody I love, I completely give myself to them. And I totally just pour love and appreciation and all of that. And I was doing that to her. And she would say, you're the perfect person. You do all the things. She meant it. But the problem is she couldn't keep it. Once a borderline said to me, it doesn't matter how much love you give to us, it goes into a black hole and disappears. What she's saying is, for the normal person, when you love them, it sort of goes into the hard drive and creates an avatar of you, an introject of you that you can interact with when you're not around. She can't do that. So anyway, so the opposite. So now you become a situational narcissist. The narcissist is incapable of interacting with people in objective reality, called an external object. External objects don't exist for the narcissist. They meet you, and as Sam Vaknin says, they see you, you look attractive to them for whatever reason. They take a snapshot of you. They take that snapshot, they internalize it, and then they say, this now is who I'm in love with. The external object, you, the real person, is meaningless to them. You're supposed to live up to the internal fantasy, and of course you never will. They can't hold on to you they don't have empathy. They're sociopathic. They don't have empathy for you, which means that you don't exist in objective reality to them. You only exist in the internal. If they meet you and they decide that you're their fantasy person, they will try and get you to fit now the distorted fantasy in their mind of who you are. You won't. They will discard you as a stick figure, and they will look for another stick figure to replace it with, even though you were the original inspiration for them. So you become that. Your borderline actually gave you this perfect fantasy that went into your hard drive, and you created an avatar of what she was, this perfect angel, this perfect worshiper, the perfect sex goddess, the perfect girlfriend, the perfect wife, the perfect partner, the perfect muse, whatever it is. You put that in there because she did objectively give that to you. You put that inside of you, and then she, the objective external object, completely changed. She's unpredictable. She did not follow through with the reality she presented to you. And so you have to choose. If you look at objective reality, you're going to be extremely hurt, disappointed, and on top of that, you believe that you'll die. Because your nervous system, the moment that she did that, said, this woman is going to make me live. She's going to give me my life force. And now she's not, so you have to then only retreat into your fantasy. Now you understand why, after 10 years, when the relationship is over and she gave you the final discard, you still wake up in the middle of the night. You still miss her. You still think about her. You still pine over her. You mourn over the loss of the fantasy that never became true. And the fantasy that never became true keeps tearing away at you. I've never been to, I'm trying to make sure that I'm truthful about this. I've never been to a strip club. Never. It's because I don't like being teased. I don't want to sit there and look at, hopefully, really hot looking women dancing seductively in front of me and getting me all sexually aroused if I'm not going to, get some pleasure out of it. I don't like being teased. I don't like it. So I'm saying this because that's what being with a borderline is like. It's like being teased. I mean, I look at this picture here, and of course I project onto her. I'm sure that model is a perfectly normal, healthy, wonderful person, whoever she is. But I project onto her, what my borderline was like. And she was like that. She would look at me with those big blue eyes and that beautiful mouth. And yeah, she was a little disheveled because she wasn't very good at, taking care of herself. And her hair was always, but she was beautiful and she was so vulnerable. And I was but then she would say, do you want to come over? And then she'd say, I've changed my mind. She said, "You want to have sex?" And then she'd say, "I'm not in the mood." And then she'd walk around in skimpy underwear. And, I would be teased. It would be like that. And that's what being with a borderline is like. The promise of love, the promise of connection, never fulfilled. Come here, go away. And you end up in that state where you have to choose between the fantasy that she presented, which gave you the feeling that if she could just become that, you'd be completely saved and perfect. And she never did. And that's what ends up happening. You become insane. You become you fall in love with the false, introjected promise, the fantasy within you, and you need her because you are not totally crazy. You actually need to have the external object validate the internal. She never does. But your situational narcissism says, I can't let go of this fantasy. So no matter what you say to yourself, that's why all those of you who say how much you hate your borderline ex, and no, I'm not in love with her. In fact, I hate her. She needs to be brought to justice. I can't stop talking about her. And people have actually said to me, why don't you make videos about how they deserve to, the relationship's over and you're still wanting me to talk about how they need to take responsibility. It means you're just like this angry little kid. You're still wrapped up. Mommy won't love me. You're having a temper tantrum because mommy isn't meeting your needs. And you're in total denial of it. Now, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. The borderline is a magical being. But the magic that they create is a hell. And they have the ability to create a spell. They put a love spell on you and they never fulfill it. They make you long for them, the perfection that they want to be. By the way, that internal introject that you have, that's the person they want to be. And they know they can never be that. And they hate you for it. Because when you look at them with, your eyes full of love, they see in you the introject they created. And they know they can never be that. And they hate you for expecting her to be that way. Because she's reminded of how imperfect she is. In the beginning, she thought she could pull it off. Now she knows she can't. And they tell themselves, I'm not making this up, they tell themselves, how can I be so incredibly abusive to him that he will never come back? He deserves better. I can't live up to his expectations of me, which are the expectations she gave you, by the way. So you become a situational narcissist because that's what a narcissist is. A narcissist lives in their internal fantasy and objective reality isn't good enough. And they are psychotic because external reality, they reject that and they only live in their internal perfect, just like Jehovah. Jehovah walks around his perfect Garden of Eden, and if you don't meet his expectations, he kicks you out. So you're now a situational narcissist. That's why those of you who write me, there's one guy that wrote me, it used to really bug the crap out of me, but the guy's become a narcissist. And I had to block him because it was just so frustrating for me. It makes me sound like a narcissist. But he would come onto the channel and he would say, the story is that his borderline killed herself. And then he would want to say, so what can I do about my current relationship that's going good, but I don't trust her? And I'm afraid I'm going to sabotage it. And I would say, well, you got to do the one thing. He'd say, I'm not going to do that. That's not my problem. Well, it's because he's still in love with the introject, even though she's dead. Even though she killed herself, the ultimate discard. He's still in love with the internal object of her, and he knows that his current real wife or girlfriend will never meet up to that. So the only way that you're going to be able to get rid of that introject, that unrealistic introject that does not exist in reality, that you keep trying to force the borderline to become, She told you she was going to be this perfect person, and you keep trying to hold her to that. That's why you're so angry with her. Because she said she was going to be the perfect partner. She was going to love you and fix you. And she didn't do that. And you can't let go of the fantasy because your nervous system says, if I let go of the fantasy, we're going to die. Don't you get it, stupid? Get her back. Wait for her to come back. Or pretend that you don't love her, but really get angry with her. Fantasize about wanting to punish her. I remember when my borderline, after I had moved down to where she was, I put down a bunch of money to rent a big house for the two of us, and I went and I was living in this empty, unfurnished house because she was going to furnish it and all of that. And I'm living in this empty house all by myself. And then Christmas came around and she got rid of me, at Christmas. Perfect timing. After I, in tears, begged her not to get rid of me because Christmas was, the most painful time because that's when I had the most family issues. I'm sure you understand. And I was in there, by myself, after Christmas for 2 weeks, crying myself to sleep. And I started fantasizing about, what I'm going to do? I'm just going to become her ex-boyfriend, who was a full-blown grandiose narcissist who used to tie her up and, do all kinds of other things. And I said, I'm going to do that. If that's what it takes, I'm going to do that. And then I caught myself and I went, I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I did that. Not only that, I knew that strategy of trying to overcome her narcissism by becoming more of a narcissist, I knew that I would lose because I'm not. I knew that I don't have NPD. I don't have a personality disorder. People have personality disorders have nothing to lose because they're on the verge of dying every moment anyway. So they can take it all the way to the edge, and I can't do that. She would have destroyed me. When she hoovered me back, I told her about my fantasy, and she says, I think I would have liked that. She wants to turn you into a narcissist. That's why she stays with narcissists longer than normal people. She wants to turn you into one. And if you stay with her, she will. You will actually catch her mental illness. You will become an acquired situational narcissist, or you will get late onset narcissism, and you will actually become a borderline narcissist comorbid. The actual comorbid, if you want to really see comorbid borderline narcissism, look at the partners of a borderline that's been with them for 5 years, 10 years. Then you'll see the perfect borderline narcissist comorbid. But the good news is that you can heal. You don't have a personality disorder. You aren't stuck with this forever. If you're stuck in it, if you're stuck in the fantasy of loving the introject, which you won't be able to let go of on your own, then you can do the one thing and you can heal. You can completely reverse your late onset narcissism. You can completely get out of the trauma pause. You can completely get your sense of self back and heal the part in you that was broken that got you into the relationship with the borderline to begin with. I tell you how to do that in my book, How I Survived My Borderline Girlfriend. Every single person that's followed every single one of my suggestions has healed based on what they told me. People who don't follow my suggestions don't heal. You don't believe me? Keep doing what you're doing. I guarantee you in 5 years you'll still be in pain. Do what I suggest, and perhaps within a couple of months. It took me 2 months. It might take you longer, but I guarantee you in a very short period of time you can completely heal. Go get my book, How I Survived My Borderline Girlfriend, audiobooks.thunderwizard.com, or put 10 seconds of effort searching my channel. You'll find it on there also. That's it for me, my friends. I wish you guys all the best. Don't become this guy. I'm a bad boy, right, mommy?